Hello everyone, this is the book of History of Literature in English, the Routledge History of English Literature in English, and इसके राइटर रोनाल्डो कैटर एंड जॉन मैक्रे। ये बुक आपके एमए एंट्रेंस एग्ज़ाम के लिए दिल्ली यूनिवर्सिटी, BHU, JNU, एनी एमए एंट्रेंस एग्ज़ाम ओके एंड नेट JRF के लिए भी बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है। सो हम इसको एवरी सिंगल डे पढ़ेंगे, इस बुक रीडिंग करेंगे इसकी। ओके इस बुक में आपका जो इंग्लिश लिटरेचर की जो हिस्ट्री है वो कवर होगी, जो एक पार्ट होता है जिसमें वर्ल्ड लिटरेचर होती है, इंडियन इंग्लिश लिटरेचर आल्सो इंक्लूडेड, एंड दिस इज़ द पार्ट ऑफ history of English literature. So we will read every single day. Now let's read. Okay, चलो पढ़ते हैं। पहला इसमें इसकी जो रीडर सेड अबाउट द फर्स्ट एडिशन के बारे में दिया हुआ है। फिर आगे ये सब हम निकाल देते हैं, ये नेसेसरी नहीं है। हम इसके कंटेक्स्ट में है द बिगनिंग ऑफ इंग्लिश, ओल्ड एंड मिडल इंग्लिश। फिर रेनेसा है, रेस्टोरेशन जो रोमांटिसिज्म है, रोमांटिक पीरियड 19th सेंचुरी, 20th सेंचुरी, 20th सेंचुरी, 1945 टू द प्रेजेंट एंड अदर फीचर्स हैं। यहाँ से फॉरवर्ड ये भी छोड़ देते हैं, दिस इज़ नॉट नेसेसरी। नेक्स्ट ओके यहाँ से पढ़ेंगे द बिगनिंग ऑफ इंग्लिश, ओल्ड एंड मिडल इंग्लिश 16,000 to 1485। तो हम इस बुक को डेली पढ़ेंगे। ये आपके JNU, DU और BHU के एग्ज़ाम MA एंट्रेंस एग्ज़ाम के लिए ज़रूरी है ये बुक, तो इसको हम पूरा पढ़ेंगे। आज से शुरुआत करेंगे और ये पूरी बुक हम पढ़ेंगे साथ साथ। तो स्टार्ट करते हैं। ओके Literature is as old as human language and as new to tomorrow sunrise, and literature is everywhere, not only in books but in videos, television, radio, CDs, computers, newspapers, in all the media of communication. Where a story is told or an image created, it starts with words and which speech. The first literature in any culture is oral. The classical Greek epics of Homer, the Asian narratives of Gilgamesh, and the Bhagavad Gita, the earliest version of the Bible and the Quran, were also communicated orally and passed on from generation to generation, which variation, additions, omissions, and embellishments until they were set down and written from in version which have come down to us. In English, the first signs of oral literature tend to have three kinds of subject matter: religious, war, and the trials of daily life, all of which continue as theme of a great deal of writing. There is a vast expanse of time before the Norman conquest in 1066 from which, जैसे भी आप पढ़ना चाहें, 1066 from which fragments of literature text remain, although these fragments make quite a substantial body of work if we consider that the same expanse of time has passed between Shakespeare's time and now has passed between the earliest extant texts and 1066. We can begin to imagine just how much literature expression there must have been, but these countries remain largely dark to us apart from a few illuminating flashes and fragments, since almost all of it was never written down, and since most of what was preserved in writing as destroyed later, particularly during the 1530s. The fragments that remain confirm that the motivational and inspirational for producing literature and for listening to it or later reading it are the same. All thought history literature can give comfort and conclusion as religious literature often does, can illuminate and mirror our problem, and can affirm and reinforce social, political and आइडियोलॉजिकल स्टैंड पॉइंट्स। इसको आप सुनते रहिए, ये एक ऑडियो बुक्स की तरह है, आप इसको सुन सकते हैं या फिर देखेंगे तो और भी। ये मैप है नॉर्थम्बिया, यॉर्क, अंगोलियो, अमेरिका, ईस्ट अंगोलियो। तो इसको आप ठीक से देख लेना, वीडियो को पॉज करके। ओके, इसको रीड करना ठीक से, ये इसको रीड करना ठीक से। एंड नेक्स्ट वी मूव। ये कुछ डिटेल्स हैं ये मैप की, 9 to 10 सेंचुरीज में कैसा था, और उससे पहले 5th सेंचुरी में इंग्लैंड कहाँ पे कैसे, ये दिया हुआ है। हम सिर्फ इसको रीड करेंगे। तो ये चीज़ें हैं, इनको थोड़ा आप जूम इन करके पढ़ लेना। पर्सनल एंड रिलीजियस वॉइसेस। The evil ended, so also may this. Dios lament. The first fragments of literature is known as Caedmon's hymns, hymn, hymn, Caedmon's hymn. It dates from the late 17th century, around 67. The story goes the Caedmon was a lay worker on the estate of the monastery of Whiteway in Northumbria, and the voice of God came to him. His hymn is therefore the first song of praise in English culture and the first Christian religious poem in English. Although Latin hymns were known at the time, it was preserved by the monks of Whiteway, and it is no certain whether the few lines which have survived through the ages are the complete hymn or not. Christian monks and nuns were in effect the guardians of culture, as they were virtually the only people who could read and write before the 14th century. It is interesting, therefore, that most of the native English culture they preserved is not in Latin, the language of the church, but the Old English, the language of the Anglo-Saxon and Jutes. It is the voice of everyday people rather than of a self-conscious artist that we hear in Caedmon's hymn and in such texts as Doors Laments, also known simply as Dor, or the Seafarer. These reflect ordinary human experience and are told in the first person. They make the reader of or hearer relate directly with the national I, and frequently contained intertextual reference to religious texts. Although they express a faith in God, only Caedmon's hymn is an overtly religious piece. Already we can notice one or two convention creeping in way of writing, which will be found again and again in later work. One of these is the use of the first person speaker who narrates his experience, inviting the reader or listener to identify with him and sympathizes with his feelings. The frame of reference of these texts is to the Latin exegetical commentaries and liturgical texts. The seafarer, of instance, while describing much of the day-to-day life of the seafarer, also reflect a close familiarity with contemporary interpretations of the psalm. The speaker induces lament recount the day-to-day trial of life, naming several heroes of Germanic origin and their sufferings. with the repeated chorus that evil ended. So also may this having gone through the heroic name, he arrived at the own troubles. He was a successful vet or minstrel who sang for an important family, but now another ward has taken his place. This is the first poem in history about unemployment, but with a refrain that the bad time will praise. This is text. And so I can sing, O my own sad plight, who long stand high as the hedoning bird, dure my name, dear to my lord, mild was my service for many a winter, kindly my king, till Heroinda came, skillful in his song, and usurping the land right, which once my gracious Lord granted to me, the evil ended, so also may this. The seafarer and the benders, also with various other texts, but preserved in the extra book, a manuscript containing only poetry, which dates from the ends of the 10th century and is still kept in extant cathedral library in Devon, like Doors Lament. These are two elegiac poems of solitude, exile, and sufferings. Suffering, the theme of the solitary outcast, bent on help or protection for a noble lord, is found again here, and memory plays a significant part in the speaker's thought. He recalls old legends of battle and bold bloodshed and wonders where now in the warrior there is the warhouse. This reflects the biblical tradition of questioning Eptimosin in the famous in the famous Obia Sant. Where are they? The only reply he can give in the own context is in the night of the past, as if they never had been. He who shall mouse on these mouldering ruin and deeply ponder this dark line life must brood untold legend of battle and bloodshed, and heavy the mood that troubles his heart, where now is the very warrior, where is the warhouse. Bestowal of treasure and sharing of feast, alas, the bright alcove, the byrny clad barrier, the princess in the splendor, those days are long spent in the night of the past, as if they never had been. The banderier, benders, so, uh, so, uh, uh, so, uh, so there is a clash between past and present, between remembered glory and the despair of the moment, but there is also some consolation, some hope for the future, usually ending with the hope of heaven. The speaker, the eye of the poem, is a figure who will retain again and again in literature thought. The ages described her as the sex in solitude, pondering pondering. Lo, I will tell the dearest of dreams, the dream of the road. It would seem that the church is preserving text in Old English was aware of a particularly English linguistic and cultural identity, which over the countries it put nature in its own written work in different genre. As the language moved toward early Middle English in the 13th century, the genres include history such as the Venerable Beds Latin, Ecclesiastes, ex, ex, ecclesiastical history of the English people and the Anglo-Saxon chronicles, devotional work, or those dedication to a life of religious observance, such as the 12th century Ancrines Rouleau and the beginning of the philosophical tradition in the writing of Eloquent and Saint Anselm, translation of part of the Christian Bible were made, such as the book of Genesis, a version of which was for a long time believed to be the work of Cadmon. This was translated from Saxon into Old English. In its use of the local language, it is a conscious attempt to strengthen and position of the Christian faith throughout the Iceland and to assert a local linguistic and cultural identity. Perhaps the most okay, perhaps the most clearly Christian of Old English texts is the dream of the road. The road is the cross. Perhaps as early as the end of the 7th century, one version of this is found on the Rothwell cross, a standing stone in Dumfriesshire, Galloway, in what is now southern Scotland, quite close to Northumbria, where the original was written. One fascinating feature of the dream of the road is the large number of phrases and images used for the figure of Christ uh, and his cross, a tree, a glorious gold cross, a simple vase cross, and a cross with a voice which speak of its own transformation for the tree to better of Christ. As with many texts of the time, there are many references to Latin hymns and liturgy indulged in the text. It is the highly visual text full of joy and suffering, light and darkness, earthly reality and heavenly blesses. Lo, I will tell that does the dearest of dreams that I dreamed in the midnight when mortal men were sunk in slumber. Me seemed I saw a wondrous tree towering in air, most signing of cross, compassed with light. There is a certain level of definement here and some explicitity of expression. The text presumes as ability in a receiver who heard or read the story of identify of more than one level the meaning and reference the text contains. This is an important feature of all literature in that is that it is representational more than simply referential. It show illustrates and exemplify, often in very refined and sophisticated ways. Anglo-Saxon literature is full of images. The speaker in the seafarer, despite his suffering as my work was beaten by the breaking seas, reject land and the town because his heart is hunted by love of the bark beginning the wood from which the ship was made. bark जो होता है वो ship beginning the wood from which the ship was made, जिससे जहाज बनाया जाता है, इसको कहते हैं bark. stand for the whole ship. Hunter take the idea of the supernatural presence and places it in the speaker's heart. As the dream of the road gives us images of suffering and redemptions, the seafarer gives us image of ships and the sea. Each provides image of human life using the tree, the cross, the sa to stand for aspects of human experience, including again in the dream of the road, the sense of being alone without human protection and in need of spiritual support from the cross. This is my heart's desire, and all my hope waits on the cross. In this world now, I have few powerful friends. All the texts in the oral tradition in Anglo-Saxon literature are poetry. They were written down probably many years after they were first performed. Most are short. Beowulf is the only long epic poem. What they have in common in their verse from a double line which are break in the middle calls the Caesura from the Latin. This gives the verse its distinctive rhythm with the minstrel of Scots would use in performing the text for his audience. The use of alliteration, repeated sound is another characteristic of Old English verse. Language note: the earliest figurative language. Old English poetry is characterized by a number of poetic tropes which involve enable a writer to describe things indirectly and which require a reader imaginatively to construct their meaning. The most bits prized of this figurative discussion are what are known as uh, tingling, like kinning, often occur in composed, for example, Orand, Well Road, or Son Road, meaning the Sa, Benhas, Von House, meaning the human body. Some kinning involve warring or inviting birds. Other appear to be chosen to meet the alliterative requirement of a poetic line, and as a result, some kinning are difficult to decode, leading to despite in critical interpretation, but kinning to allow more abstract context to be communicated by using more familiar word. For example, God is often described as manus monosynes, weird, guardians of mankind. Old English poetry also contained a wide range of conventional poetic diction. Many of the words begin creating to allow alliterative pattern to be made. There are therefore numerous alternative for keyword like battle, warrior, house, ship, the Shah, princess, and so on. Some are decorative rephrase as king can be a giver of ring or a giver of treasure. Literally, a king was expected to provide his warrior the gift after they had fought off him. Beowulf standard out as a poem which makes extensive use of this kind of figurative language. There are over 1,000 compounds in the poem, totaling one third of all the words in the text. Many of these compounds are kinning. The word of kin is still used in many Scottish and Northern English dialects, meaning to know. Such language is a way of knowing and an expression meaning in striking and memorable ways. Is it has continuously with the kinds of poetic compounding found in nearly all letter poetry, but especially in the modernist text of Ger- Ger- Gerard Manley, Hopkins, and James Joyce. The only other poet whose name has come down to use in also probably Northumbrian Snewolf, who probably lived in the 18th or 19th century. He has been credited with writing many poems. At one time, the Dream of the Road was thought to have been his work, but he is only definitely known to have written two poems in the extra book and two in another collection. Now, in the chapter of Vercelli in Italy, known as the Vercelli book. This is a collection of prose as well as poetry on exclusively religious themes. Snival's poems are all on religious themes such as story of saints, the fates of the Alexis and Christus, essences. ओके, यहीं तक आज हम पढ़ेंगे एंड नेक्स्ट डे भी we will read long poems. जहाँ हमने छोड़ा है वहीं से स्टार्ट करेंगे. आप इस बुक को रीड करने के लिए इसी चैनल पे कल फिर मिलेंगे. और ये एमए एंट्रेंस के लिए इंग्लिश एमए एंट्रेंस के लिए DU BHU NJNU के लिए वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, नीट JRF के लिए इम्पोर्टेंट है। आप इसको 1-2 बार रीड करेंगे और मैं जो बोल रही हूँ, मैं जिसे पढ़ रही हूँ, आप उसे सुनते रहेंगे तो ये बुक आपको कम्प्लीटली मतलब पूरी तरह से गिरफ्त नहीं, फिर भी कुछ चीज़ें खुद से पढ़ेंगे सीखेंगे तो आएगा। उसके बावजूद आपके पास अगर टेक्स्ट बुक हो तो यू कैन रीड दैट। बाकी हम ये बुक पूरी इसी चैनल पे पढ़ेंगे। और यही बुक नहीं, इंग्लिश लिटरेचर एमए के लिए जितनी बुक रिक्वायर की जाती हैं इंग्लिश एमए एंट्रेंस के लिए, वो सारी बुक्स हम यहाँ पर रीडिंग करेंगे। यहाँ पर बुक रीडिंग का पूरा मतलब एक प्लेलिस्ट मैं इसकी बना दूँगी, राउटलेज की हिस्ट्री ऑफ इंग्लिश लिटरेचर की। उसमें ये सारे वीडियोस उसमें स्टेप बाय स्टेप जाते रहेंगे, तो आप उनको पूरी प्लेलिस्ट को देख लीजिएगा। और ये फर्स्ट वीडियो है, नेक्स्ट वीडियो कल आएगी। Okay, till then, bye bye. Please subscribe to my channel. If you like this video, like, hit the bell icon, and thanks for watching. Bye bye till the next video.